Hello everyone, welcome back to the Forge. Now today we're going to jump back into our Bowie project. We're going to get this sucker wrapped up. The first thing we're going to start focusing on is this guard right here. We need to get some reference lines scribed on this guard so we know how thin we want to grind it, so we know where we want it to mate up with our handle here. So let's go ahead and start laying them out, and then we'll get over the grinder and start shaping it. Alright, during this part of the process, everything is going to be scribed a little thick. I'll eventually clean it up and grind it down thinner, but I would rather have too much material than not enough as I work on this. So I'm going to go to scribe in the reference lines for the thickness of the lugs, as well as scribe in the reference lines to where our tang hole is, so I can keep track of that when we get ready to start grinding our handle down here in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on that. Alright, now what I've done is I've used my height gauge to scribe a line all the way around the handle here, and that will be the finished thickness of the handle. Of course, we'll sculpt it from there, but this will give us some lines when we go to the grinder and grind off all this excess wood here that we can follow to keep everything uniform. Alright, our handle is to a much better place now. It's the proper width. I did leave it a little bit big. It's still a little bit oversized, but that's mainly just for final fit up purposes. Now we're going to move back to our guard here. I've got some lines scribed here on the front. That's the overall thickness of our guard, or width of our guard. So we're going to take it in here to the bandsaw and we're going to go ahead and cut it, and then we'll get the layout on it properly. If it shows I'm weak inside, there is nowhere left to go. All I can do is run and hide. 'Cause I've been running this world without you, with no one at all, one way to fall. Alright, we got our guard cut and cleaned up on the grinder. Mates up with the handle a little bit better. Remember the handle, I left the handle a little bit thick, and so it's not perfectly flush because I'm not ready for that yet. But now we're going to come along here and we're going to mark where the ricasso meets up with our guard and scribe it on the outsides, so we can then begin the process of forming the lugs for our Bowie knife here, because we want everything to flow. We want all these lines to line up all the way to the end of the handle. So I'm going to go ahead and get the Sharpie. We're going to mark it. Then we're going to use our height gauge here to scribe us a good line there, and then we'll begin the process of grinding that shape. There's our marks right there. We will come in here and we will draw the curve from here up to here to form the lugs for this. And with these marks here, we'll know that everything flows together. Everything should be straight and in line. Alright, there's the thickness of our lugs to start out. I will thin that down quite a bit when we do the final forming of them. So now I just need to come in here and draw the curves I want, and we'll be set and ready to go to the grinder. Alright, we've got our guard shape for the most part. You can see kind of the design I'm going for here. It is not perfect yet. It's still pretty rough. It'll be refined in the handle shaping process and everything else. I'm going to go ahead and jump on the grinder again and clean up these sides and get some of these deeper scratches out so they'll be easier to work out later on. And then we're going to move on to bedding the handle. I want this to be a nice clean fit up. You can see it's kind of loose right now. I want a good clean fit up every time, so when we go in to drill the handle pin and everything else will be nice and straight with no concerns, no problems. So let's head back over to the grinder and get this guard cleaned up, and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, for the most part I got the really deep scratches out, which is what I was aiming for. I'm not too worried at this point about getting them all out, because I'm going to have to come back in when I shape the handle and thin these lugs down even more for the look that I'm going for. So far so good. Cleaned up fairly reasonable. So now we're going to move on to bedding the Tang and head off to the next step. Now you saw when I bedded the Tang on this Bowie knife here that I wrapped the Tang with plastic wrap first. And the reason I did that is because even though we're using petroleum jelly or something else to keep the steel from contacting and sticking to the epoxy, sometimes it still does. And so I actually had that happen on the railroad spike katana build here a video or so ago. The epoxy got stuck when I was bedding the handle for it. It was a nightmare to get loose. So I wrapped it with saran wrap. I watched Liam Hoffman do that on some of his chef's knives. And if you do it right, wrap it tight. You don't have to wrap it a whole bunch of layers, a couple or so. And then cover that with Vaseline. Whenever you fill your Tang with epoxy and stick it in there, it's pretty much guaranteed that it's going to come out with no problem. And then you just bring it out. You just unwrap it, and your Tang is good and clean. Your handle's bedded, and you're all set. So it's a nice little tip to keep in mind. A lot of you may already know how to do that. A lot of you may not, but it works really well in a lot of different projects. So now at this point, we've got everything ready to drill the handle pin. Now I'm going to go ahead and drill this right now, even though the handle's not shaped, because that will allow us to hold this handle in place and do some of the contouring of the handle here, get it kind of down to its final dimensions before we actually do the final finish and glue up of this Bowie knife. So let's go ahead and get our pin location marked out, get it drilled, and move on to the next step. Alright, now as I drill this handle pin location, I'm not going to drill all the way through. I'm going to drill down until this bit touches the steel and marks the steel, because the moment it hits that steel, if I start trying to drill through, this bit's going to develop a little bit of wobble and it's going to wallow out the hole here on the top. So I'm going to drill through, hit the steel, get the bit to bite into it, take this handle off, finish drilling through the Tang, and then put it back together and go ahead and drill out the other side. That should help us keep a pretty straight hole. that we know our pin fits all the way through, everything's good to go, we can come in here and get our template that we're going to use for our handle. I'll outline it, and now we can start shaping the handle. Okay, so far so good. Let's get the template laid out in here, get it traced out, and move on to getting this handle shaped.
Don't let me carry it alone. I feel like my head is full of stone. There's not a whole lot I can do when all my visions have come true. Don't come round and waste my time. A generation of my time. There is nothing we can do to stop this plague from breaking through. Don't come round and waste my time. A generation of my kind. There is nothing we can do to stop this plague from breaking through.
Alright, we've got everything ready here. I've got my guard rough shaped and ready to glue up. Our handle's been rough formed. It's ready, so now we just got to put some epoxy in this handle, get everything together, let it glue up, and then we'll be ready to finish the shaping process on the grinder.
There's a place I have never been, on the cover of a magazine, alright. Gotta stay till the bitter end, I'm the upshot of foreign trends, alright. Is it time for me? There's no guarantee. I see everybody hazy, no one here to faze me. I'm crowding with myself, stunning visions of the fairies, running through the prairies, lifted by the sun.
Alright, this is where we currently are right now. I've got a little hand sanding to do on the handle to get all the scratch marks out, and then I'll catch you at the end when we show the finished product. That wraps up my Bowie knife. I appreciate y'all for joining us on this 3-part series. If you would, hit that subscribe button. Remember to ring the notifications bell to be informed of our newest content as it posts. I appreciate you very much for watching. You have a good one. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.